Welcome everybody to the Planning Committee meeting on the 2nd of May. We've only got 2 items on the agenda today that we have to consider other than the appeal decisions. The third item being Castle Meadows has been withdrawn and will come back to us at another time. So to get on with the business of the meeting, my name is Councillor Phil Murphy. I'm the chair of the committee. Dale?
I'm Councillor Dale Rook. I'm vice chair of the committee.
Craig O'Connor, head of planning.
Philip Thomas, development services manager.
Paige Mosley, solicitor to planning committee.
Andrew Jones, development management area team manager.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Thank you, everybody. Can I remind everybody that if they want to contribute to the meeting, those online, that you use the hands up in the chat and to keep your cameras on at all times so that we can see that you're there to enable you to vote. Richard or Paige, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Riley.
I believe Councillor Anne Webb has got internet problems, so she may not be able to join us, although I understand she's going to try and join on her phone if she can. Declarations of interest. Councillor Bryn?
Yes, I'd like to declare a personal and non-prejudicial interest, please, in the first item, Wybridge.
Okay, thank you. I understand you'll be contributing to the discussion early and then leaving.
Yeah. Yes, please, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. So we move on to the applications before us. The first one is application DM 2020.
Remove the minutes.
Oh, sorry, the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a proposal that we? Thank you, Sue. Ben, thank you very much. Yes, we move on to the applications now. The first one is DM 2022-00848, the conversion of the former day centre, Boverton House in Chepstow, into apartments and the construction of 9 residential apartments on the land. Phil Thomas, I understand you're presenting this one.
Thank you, Chair. So that's the site in the slide there. So Boverton House was a day centre run by the council, but was sold off for redevelopment following its closure in 2016. The building, it dates back from the late 19th century. It's constructed from grey rubble, stone and yellow ashlar with some more modern extensions, as those of us who were at the site last Wednesday saw. So I'll just run through some of the slides before I go into my presentation fully. That's the site as it exists. You can see the driveway running up from Bulwark Road. There is a stone wall that runs around the outside of the site, and large mature trees on the periphery and on the sites on the neighbouring properties side as well. That's the ground floor. Proposed ground floor of Boverton House to be converted. The scheme features the conversion of the existing house to 6 apartments. There'll be 3 there you see on the ground floor, and a new build block to the south that would accommodate 9 apartments. The modern extensions to Boverton House would be re-rendered, but no other external alterations would be made. And as said, the application also seeks the erection of a new 3-storey block of 9 apartments on the site of the existing car park. The new build apartment block will be stepped down the slope in comparison to Boverton House. So if we look at the slides, that's the first floor showing 2 flats at Boverton House, and then that's the penthouse, as it's called, in the roof, effectively, of Boverton House. And then that's showing the existing elevations of Boverton. You can see there's a large extension to the left as we're looking at the east elevation, the front elevation there, and that partly accommodates the fire escape and stairs. So that would be the proposal there. So Boverton sits to the right-hand side of the top east elevation there. You can see that would be converted, as said, to the 6 apartments, and then 9 apartment block is to the left-hand side there to the south, and that would be set down because it's slightly in front of Boverton House. It's further down the slope, would be set down and would be therefore secondary and well below the height of Boverton House itself. And then the lower slides show the rear of the properties in relation to each other. And then they show the side elevations. So the north-hand elevation, which is the top right, shows the side of Boverton House with the apartment block sort of greyed out a little bit at the background, and the lower elevations show the south and north elevations of the proposed new villa, as it's called. And then that shows the layout. So you can see that the existing Boverton House is to the north and the new block to the south, and there will be parking in front of each of the 2 buildings there. And then that's the landscaping green infrastructure plan. So there'll be extensive additional planting to actually green up the site and to reduce the impact of the additional parking spaces provided. The large mature trees around the periphery would be retained. And then those are the floor plans of the apartment block, ground floor, first floor, second floor, and then some photos. So that's Boverton House. As you can see, that was a later extension, the rendered area to the left, and then there's a sort of small extension to the right-hand side. You can just see the neighbouring property, which is sort of a half-timbered effect, if you like, on the right-hand side, but that's not part of the application site. It's a different dwelling. And then that shows the area where the apartment block is going effectively. There's lots of space around the Boverton House with large trees you can see around the edge. And then there's the access down to Bulwark Road. And then that's looking towards the right-hand side of Boverton House, the front of Boverton House towards a neighbouring property. And then that's a fire escape at the back of the newer extension to Boverton House. And then that's looking towards the side curtilage of Boverton House. And that's looking back towards where the neighbour was with a half-timbered effect neighbouring property. So those are the issues. So I said the existing boundary trees will be retained, and vehicle and pedestrian access to the site will be achieved through the existing access point at Bulwark Road, which will be widened by 2 metres to improve the access for residents and emergency service vehicles. The existing wall will be swept up the driveway to align with the altered road access. The existing access will be resurfaced, and the existing gate refurbished. In total, 21 car parking spaces will be provided within the site, and 20% of these will have electric vehicle charging points. The new build block would be finished in brick with stone detailing to windows and bays, and it would have photovoltaics on the roof and be served by air source heat pumps to ensure its sustainability credentials are of a high standard. The proposed new block would be similar in mass to Boverton House, but as it stepped down the slope, it would appear secondary as its roof would be lower than the existing property. Its materials and colour palette reflect those of the existing building, but are presented in a more modern form. The proposal preserves the character of this part of the conservation area and will have no serious adverse effect on views and vistas into or out of the conservation area. Following negotiations, the scale and finishing materials are now considered appropriate. The details of the proposed works respect the proportions, materials and construction of existing villa-type buildings in the area. The proposal is considered acceptable in placemaking terms. In terms of parking, the proposal offers 21 rather than the 25 spaces expected in the council's parking guidelines. In this case, the sustainable location of this site allows a relaxation of those standards without the likelihood of harm to amenity or highway safety. This site occupies one of the most sustainable locations in the county, and the occupiers of these dwellings will be less reliant on the car to go about their daily business. The proposal does include a covered cycle store that can house up to 15 bicycles. In respect of affordable housing provision, 5 dwellings would normally be required to be provided on site. However, following discussions with the developer, it was argued that the development would not be viable with on-site provision, leading to the council appointing an independent expert advisor to assess the proposal against planning policy and standard viability criteria. This independent advisor concluded that it is neither viable nor practical for the proposed development to deliver affordable housing on site. It is viable for the developer to make a financial contribution of almost £69,000 towards the provision of affordable housing off-site, and this would be secured by a Section 106 agreement. The developer has agreed to provide this. So the scheme is considered acceptable and would bring forward several smaller units of much-needed residential accommodation, together with a useful financial contribution towards affordable housing in the locality, and it's therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, and I think this is a very good use for a very sad-looking site. It's really crying out now for development. I'm glad the entrance is being widened too. It's a pretty busy road that's coming out onto. I've got nobody scheduled to speak on this, so we'll go to the list, and the first one is Councillor Prynne.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a number of small questions, if that's okay. Could you tell me if the degradation of the border walls has been addressed? If there is amenity space where it's safe for children to play, should children end up living in these flats? And I noticed you stated there was a lot of car charging space there, which is great facilities, I mean, and that's great. But could you tell me if there would be e-bike charging within the bike shed on site? It's just that it is on a hill, and therefore I would have thought it would be more likely that e-bikes would be put in that bike shed than others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prynne. Phil, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, sorry, could I just clarify that first point about the boundary walls, Councillor Prynne?
Yeah, I noticed that the boundary walls were mentioned in several of the comments online, and it's not something I admit I noticed when we were on site, but I just wondered if those concerns had been addressed by officers. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, apart from where the access is to be wide, the boundary walls, sorry. I thought I'd press it. So, except for where the access is going to be actually widened, and then they're going to run the wall up the driveway as well, the boundary wall is to be retained, so there's no intent there to remove the wall. It wouldn't make any sense to do that either. And it would have to be replaced with something. So, so the boundary wall would be retained. In terms of amenity space, there'd be shared space for the users within the site. If I perhaps go back to the slide, show the layout. So there's sort of shared space in here for users. Some of it will be planted up, so admittedly it won't be, especially towards the periphery, it won't be usable. But the site is sort of sloping, and so there will be space in here and in here for users, and to some degree there for sitting out. But obviously they're near the central area where there are parks and recreation spaces, so there is recreation space, obviously, in Bulwark Road, just to the south, where there's a large recreation field with facilities for children to play in as well, which is only a very short walk from this site. So it's sort of well catered for in the wider environs for recreation. In terms of e-bike charging, sorry, I haven't got that response. We can put that to the developer. I'm not certain it's something we can insist on at this stage, but we could encourage them to provide e-bike charging provision within their bike store there for up to 15 cycles.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I note that Councillor Webb's joined us now, so well done. You've overcome your connection problems, I see.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Bill. I share your comments, Chair, about nice to bring an old dilapidated building back into use. I think it could be a big improvement on what's existing there at the moment. I had a question regarding there's the extension. It looks like an old lift shaft or something on the outside of the building, which currently is kind of like in a tatty white. Looking at the diagrams, it looked like it was going to be refaced in stone with a brick edging. Could you confirm that? I think that would be a big improvement if that was the case.
Some of this was involved negotiation with our heritage team, because whilst it's not listed, it's in the conservation area, and it does make a positive contribution to the conservation area. They're going to re-render it, so they're going to keep it simple, but it will be obviously in a better condition and aesthetically better from being re-rendered and repainted. So it will obviously look a lot better than the rather tired-looking appearance of it at the moment, if that helps.
Okay, Councillor Bond.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. Lovely old building, beautiful old building, lovely setting. Really disappointed. I'm really disappointed that there's no affordable house premises there, or any flats or whatever. And I understand you said about the independent advisor. I wonder, I think you mentioned this when we were on site, that if more profit was made out of the properties than was anticipated, then they would be paying more back into MCC. And the other one was disappointed that this was a MCC building and it was sold to a private developer back in 2020. And I wonder if we've got anything else we ought to hold on to before we sell any more off. And the other thing I don't know is within your remit. I guess we can't say whether it's freehold or leasehold, because I know a lot of people get caught up in the leasehold situation nowadays, and I wonder if we've got no jurisdiction over that, I'm sure, but it would be a shame if people get caught up in the leasehold trap. Thank you.
Phil, do you want to come in on that? I don't think there's much there that's actually going to concern us, is there?
No, just on the the lack of sort of ability to secure affordable housing on site. Yeah, it is disappointing, but 3 RSLs, registered social landlords, were invited to look at the site to see whether they would get involved. And because we'd only require 5 units on the site, you can see how that would be a bit of a dilemma, because there's more than 5 in each unit. And an RSL wouldn't want to share the management and maintenance of a building with a private landlord as well. So that sort of creates a bit of a practical problem, really. So none of the RSLs actually wanted to get involved in actually developing the site. In terms of providing their units on site. But we are, as I say, getting that important off-site contribution, which will go into a bigger pot and provide affordable housing in the area, in conjunction with our affordable housing officer, Sally Merrick, who I understand is very pleased to receive that contribution if it's approved. If that helps.
So the second part was, you said if there was more profit made than anticipated, then that 106 would increase, you said.
That's what a viability review.
No, that's not in the minutes, but could do.
No.
Do you want to take that?
Yeah.
in the past, where we've negotiated a lower proportion, say, of affordable housing, we have asked for a viability review if the units are being sold for a higher price than was anticipated when permission was granted. So it's a possibility we could look at that as part of the Section 106 to see whether it could be reviewed after, say, a year or something, and then some sort of formula calculated to see whether there's more profit within the scheme that might secure a higher level of affordable housing.
Can we do that, please?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think that'd be well worth.
Make a note of that and try and get that. Yeah.
I beg your pardon. And of course, you can't say anything about freehold, leasehold, can you? Because that's to do with the actual business and the owner.
Absolutely, but a point well raised.
Thank you.
Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Phil. Just to say that, it's lovely to see the building being renovated, brought up to date. Just regards the parking and that it's not meeting the sort of council sort of equation, has there been an allowance for on-street parking? Is there plenty of on-street allowance for parking there? Or is it future-proof? So if is a facility there to add extra parking if necessary if the flats are fully occupied?
There certainly wouldn't be any on-street parking there. It's.
I think we've just tried to be reasonably pragmatic on this. It is in a sustainable location. The guidelines do say you can relax standards where it's in close proximity to public transport nodes, which it clearly is. There's a bus route very close by on Bulwark Road. You can walk to the station. You can walk to the bus station, the town's bus station. So, I mean, if we can't relax standards here, for placemaking terms, that is, because obviously the more parking you have, the more sterile an area generally is, isn't it? So there's a balance to be had here, I think, in creating a nice green environment for the occupiers, whilst providing them with a reasonable level of parking, and also giving recognition to its sustainable location. So I think it's just a balance we've had here. Don't think there's much. There might be one or two additional spaces might be squeezed out of areas alongside the existing proposed parking area, but you're not going to be able to do very much. I think we're really trying to get people to think differently and modal shift and to use public transport and the modes of transport rather than the private car in the future, I think, in this instance. And hopefully this sort of arrangement will encourage that rather than just creating large parking areas that people will almost always use, won't they, if they can.
I think probably that will be a discussion between potential buyers and the developer anyway, won't it? Sue McConnell.
Thank you. I'm just going to echo Councillor Howell's concerns about that. I think it's aspirational that people will, and quite rightly so, that people will look to public transport and sustainable active transport. But the sort of people I imagine who will afford the flats here are going to have a car, and while they think about it, so I'll just echo that concern. But the proof will be in the pudding, eating of the pudding, I guess.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry, could I just... I fully understand where members are coming from. It's every apartment there will have at least one parking space, if not two, depending on the size of them. And so it's not as if we're not catering for them at all. I think it's just striking that balance, really, isn't it, going forward in our towns particularly, which do have public transport options. I think this is the way forward and the way Welsh Government is certainly expecting us to think, really, rather than, again, relying on the private car as the panacea to our transport needs.
Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I wanted to say I think it's a good use of infill for the land and also the redevelopment of the dilapidated building. As we all know, we've got a housing crisis within Monmouthshire, and I feel that these units are greatly needed, particularly within the town of Chepstow, where you've got things like easy access to public transport, and therefore you can use the things like the bike parking, which is, I was really pleased to hear that they've got that on site. Pleased to see that there's electric charging for vehicles, widening of the driveway, and also the solar panels that are to go on the roof. And therefore I propose that this gets approved as per the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rock.
Thank you, Chair. As a Chepstow councillor, this building's been empty for a good number of years now, so it's high time it was brought back into use. Smaller accommodation is dire. The availability of smaller accommodation in Chepstow is dire, so this goes some way to addressing the shortage of that accommodation. Like Councillor Bryn, I would also ask that the bike charging facility may also double up as a mobility scooter charging point 2. We recently in Chepstow Castle Ward on one of the residential care centres, accommodation places there, looking to put an exterior charging point in for mobility scooters, because people tend to trail electric cables out of their front doors to the scooter too. It also presents a fire risk. So having something that was dedicated and away from the habitation would be advisable, I think. But yes, please, can we hurry up and make this happen? Thank you.
Any response to that, Phil?
We'll certainly speak to the developer about the useful ideas that the members have raised today, certainly, yeah.
Okay, we've got no other members asking to speak. We've had a proposal for approval from Councillor McKenna. Can I have a second? Councillor Callaghan, thank you very much. Rich, can we have the voting function up, please?
Sorry,
Councillor Webb,
I imagine that I can't vote, can I? I won't be able to vote, will I? Because I wasn't here for the whole presentation. Is that right?
Paige, I think that, yes, I'm sure that's right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Chair, just to clarify in terms of Councillor Bond's suggestion with regards to a review of the viability, Andrew Jones has just done some research. We did do this on a different scheme where if development didn't commence within 18 months of granting permission, then the viability was reviewed. So if members were minded to support this, that could be something that we could add in for this development to review the viability at that stage, and might give people members a bit more confidence that it is fair in terms of the contribution that has been received.
Okay, thanks for that. And general nods around? Yes, yeah, we got thumbs up and nods. Okay, thank you very much for that. Paige.
Okay, so that's approved. 14 for approval.
Thank you very much. We now move on to the next item, which is DM 2022-01800, the erection of a single-span, single-arch curved bridge across the River Wye, including landscaping on the east and west bank and public realm improvements. This is land north of the Wye Bridge in Monmouth. This is an active travel route as an alternative to the dangerous footpath on the existing road bridge. So. Very welcome as far as I can see. Phil, you're presenting this one.
Thank you, Chair. Just share my screen. There we go. Right. So, yes, as said, that says it exactly, that slide. It's the single-span, single-arch curved bridge across the River Wye, including landscaping in the east and west bank and public realm improvements. So the proposal has been developed to address the issues of safety, as the Chair has just said, across the existing Y Road Bridge, which is heavily trafficked and is a busy route for active travel, catering for pedestrians and cyclists and other non-car forms of wheeled transport. A new single-span suspended arch bridge 70 metres upstream from the existing Y Bridge was chosen amongst several options, and this would connect with the existing pathway and cycle networks on each side of the river. The bridge spanning the river would be 70 metres in length by 4.13 metres in total width, that includes the abutments there, be 37.7 metres above ordnance datum, and also be made up of approach routes and landscaping. I'll show you slides to that effect later. The Council's active travel officer is in support of the application, as the current Y Bridge is seen as a key link in the active travel network of Monmouth, traversing the river which separates Monmouth and Wisham. And the current road bridge is substandard in active travel terms and is a deterrent to modal shift, which we've just been talking about. As the existing bridge is a listed structure, it would be difficult to expand or add to it. This new bridge will create another route for safer walking, cycling and wheeling between each side of the river, allowing people to move more easily around the settlement. And this link will feed into a wider planned network, supporting modal shift and reducing car dependence. So just have a look at the slides. That shows where it is. Again, it was one that we looked at last week, if you were fortunate enough to be with us. And that summarises some of the issues I've just discussed. So that's the route of the bridge. So you can see on the western side, it would join close to where the existing route is that comes under the underpass, and then it'll cut across the riverbank, go over the spanned bridge, and then there'll be an eastern walkway there, eastern ramp rather, towards that sort of staging point, which is that area, that sort of rectangular pinkish reddish staging area which would be bollarded to prevent motorised vehicles using that area. That's a sort of montage showing how the before and after, how the span bridge would look, and then that's probably an even better image there. It's clearer. That's from the middle of the existing road bridge. And then that's from the other side, near the rowing club steps, where they launch their boats. And then that's an elevation of the bridge. So there's no works within the river itself; it's all within the banked areas. And then there's that's showing the sort of wider environmental works that'll take place around it. That's the north side near the rowing club. So the existing car park is to be used as a compound area doing construction work. It'll be enhanced afterwards with new grasscrete paving and formalised spacing, which isn't there at the moment. And the intention is to link eventually outside the application site to the north to Dixton with a 3.5 metre active travel route beyond that. And then that's the lower part nearer the actual bridge crossing, proposed bridge crossing. So there'll be environmental improvements, seated areas, landscaping, a trim trail to encourage local recreation, riverside park, seating area rather, and a more formal sort of grass setting out area for the kayaks, which use this area. And then that's the other side, where there'll be the ramp up to that area, staging area I said, which is in that bottom part of the picture, and the ramp itself will need to be screened, which I'll go into in a moment. And then that's the potential proposed lighting that, well, the type of proposed lighting that will be used so that it doesn't spill light over into the river corridor, which might disturb protected species. And that's the sort of thing that there'll be subtle lighting to light the actual bridge for users, but not to let light spill out. And those are the main material issues. So as said, the main bridge is to be a steel cable-stayed arch structure comprising a curved deck suspended from a single arch via 7 pairs of cables with a single span length of 70 metres, and the actual width of the active travel route within the bridge will be 3.5 metres wide. It'll be modern in appearance, and the proposed materials have been carefully selected to respect the setting of the surroundings and the existing Y bridge. As part of the development phase, an environmental colour assessment was carried out to inform colour selections, and weathering steel was selected for the main structural parts of the bridge, because once the material is weathered, the rust tones will complement the existing brown hues of the surrounding environment. The use of a brushed stainless steel for the hanger cables and guardrails would then complement the brown hue of the weathering steel. The lighter colour of the steel will blend into the skyline, particularly on overcast days, and there is a condition to ensure the details of the colours are agreed by the planning authority. The proposed bridge is set 70 metres away from the listed road bridge, and there is a sufficient separating distance for it not to have any harmful impact on the bridge or its immediate setting. The elegant span and arch of the proposed bridge sets it as markedly different to the listed structure, and this works in placemaking heritage terms, although details such as the balustrading and the stone wall for the eastern ramp have been requested to be conditioned. In terms of biodiversity, extensive wildlife survey work has informed this proposal due to the presence of protected species using the river corridor, including bats, otters and migrating fish. The proposed footbridge approaches to the bridge and the Wye Valley active travel route will be lit, and the lighting strategy needs to comply with the relevant safety requirements for pedestrians and cyclists, which is governed under separate legislation. The applicant acknowledges that a balance must be struck to light the area adequately for users to ensure their safety, but also ensuring light spill onto existing and proposed habitats is kept to a minimum. As part of the proposal, there will be mitigation measures to ensure that retained habitats in and around the site used by protected and notable species will not be adversely affected by artificial light. The bridge and its approach will be underlit with LED handrail lighting, and lights will be located and shielded in a way that illuminates the bridge deck but minimises light spill into the river corridor to maintain the dark horizon line for bats flying upstream. And during the construction phase, any lighting required for health and safety or security reasons will be designed to avoid light spill into surrounding habitat, including works to be carried out during daylight hours to avoid nighttime working. Artificial lighting should not be used around the watercourse to avoid disturbing spawning or migrating fish species and other species such as bats or otters that may be commuting or foraging along the river channel. If nighttime working is unavoidable, then artificial construction lighting needs to be kept to a minimum to minimise disturbance to bats and other animals. And furthermore, the applicant is seeking confirmation that the controls for the lighting can be integrated into the existing lighting network so that the Highways Department can control lighting levels or brightness remotely off-site. So consequently, we're satisfied that this element of the proposal has been appropriately considered by the developer. In terms of local amenity, the eastern ramp would run to the rear of several properties back onto the river on that side of the proposal. To ensure the privacy of these properties is maintained, there would be a 1.8 metre high screen on the side of the ramp facing those dwellings. And while this screen is to be dark grey in colour, its precise details are proposed to be conditioned. There is the opportunity for public art as well to decorate this area. There would be wider environmental improvements, including to the existing Grass Street parking area that will be resurfaced and formally marked out. the Town Council identified the need to accommodate van and trailer parking for the local kayaking groups. The applicant has agreed to look at the layout of the car park to seek to accommodate this need. It is suggested that if approved today, the amended layout plan for the car parking area could be agreed via the delegation panel. Any issues relating to Welsh Water's comments about protection of their existing infrastructure in the vicinity of the site would be a matter for the applicant to resolve under other non-planning legislation. So the recommendation is that this application is approved subject to the conditions in the report and subject to NRW's endorsement of the Habitats Regulation Assessment that's been undertaken by our ecologists, MCC ecologists, which is still, but NRW's response is still awaited. The application would be represented to committee should NRW not be able to endorse the conclusions of the associated habitats assessment. And as said, also subject to the revised car parking plan near the rowing club being agreed via the delegation panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And Councillor Payne, do you want to come in now?
Yes, please. Yes, please. If I can just speak before I leave, that'd be great. Okay. So today you have to decide whether to approve the planning of a pedestrian bridge across the River Wye at Wylesham. In November 2017, 3 local residents, Joe Walton, Kelly Jackson-Graham and Angela Jones, bravely pitched the idea of a pedestrian bridge to a group of MCC officers and elected officials. They were local residents who for years had been shocked at the dangers they and their children had to face as pedestrians and cyclists using the current road bridge. They spoke of the thousands of journeys made by school-aged children every week, HGV drivers mounting the curbs, high pollution levels and lack of cycling facilities and safe links to Wylesham and beyond. Thankfully, the meeting was really positive, and I thank all those present that day for embracing rather than dismissing what must have seemed like an inordinate challenge, but having the foresight to take it and run with it. That day, the Monmouth Town Council Active Travel Steering Group was formed, and with the assistance of bridge engineer Peter Lloyd, many volunteer hours were spent forming the initial feasibility study to prove what we already knew, that this active travel bridge is sorely needed to keep our residents safe from harm. I'd like to extend my thanks to the small band of enthusiastic volunteers, including our local WI members, who dedicated many hours collecting the data needed to secure Welsh Government funding, and to staff at Monmouth Haberdasher School, whose pupils are heavy users of the bridge, and without whose support, this scheme would not have got off the riverbank. It's important to note that local people were the drivers of this scheme. They planted the seed, provided the incentives, and helped shape the plans to improve their area for their community. As members experienced last week as we stood on the cracked pavers, this road has very high volumes of traffic and is heavily used by large HGVs accessing the Forest of Dean from the M50. This is only going to rise over the next year or so with further housing planned in the Forest of Dean. I'm now going to throw some statistics at you. Between 2016 and 2021, an average of 8 pedestrians were killed and 115 seriously injured every week in road collisions. Between 2004 and 2020, road fatalities increased 5% and serious injuries by 26%. HGVs have the highest rates of fatality risk to other road users. Between 2009 and 2013, lorries were involved in almost a quarter of cyclist deaths, despite comprising of only 5% of traffic. More pedestrians are killed or injured in collisions with HGVs than cyclists. A review of 200 accidents in which pedestrians were killed found that 14% were killed by HGV. Most of the collisions were on 30-mile-an-hour A roads. Over half the HGVs which hit a pedestrian were moving off when they struck the pedestrian, and almost all the pedestrians were crossing the road in front of the HGV at the time of the collision. In some cases, the driver failed to stop because they'd not even realised that a collision had occurred. The current bridge is the only route that Wylesham residents, comprehensive students and Haberdashers pupils can use to access education, work and town. They have to share this road and pavement with HGVs and other vehicles. school children who make approximately 842 crossings of the bridge per day between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m, and particularly the 695 a day who walk without adult supervision are at most risk from heavy flow of traffic and HGVs on the bridge. 75% of those unaccompanied crossings by children are made between 8 and 9 a.m. and 2 and 5 p.m, hours of peak traffic on that bridge, where the narrow pavement space must be carefully negotiated. We have had multiple witnesses in recent years of children crossing the road in front of moving traffic, sports bags on children's backs being brushed by HGVs, and of HGV wing mirrors passing perilously close to exposed heads. HGVs frequently end up mounting the pavements as they negotiate the bend in the bridge, witnessed on multiple occasions and evidenced by the heavily cracked pavements. We have on average 776 crossings of HGVs, buses or coaches every single day, which is more than one large HGV journey across a bridge for every crossing made by an unaccompanied child. This bridge also forms part of the designated trails, the Wye Valley Walk, Offa's Dyke National Trail, and is a vital link in the National Cycle Network, Route 423 from Cwmbran to Ross. For all these reasons, it's imperative that we give vulnerable road users the option of removing themselves from this narrow pavement on the bridge. As the WellTag 1 summarised, it is evident that the Wye Bridge is in constant use by different types of pedestrians and cyclists, and in particular unaccompanied children. This safety risk is augmented especially in presence of heavy road traffic that inevitably have the same peak times as pedestrians and cyclists during these certain commute hours. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I understand you're going to leave the room now. Thanks very much for your contribution. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I was really pleased to see the lit up access idea, and I hope that goes through. There is just one question I've got for you, and it's about accessibility for people with impaired sight. You know, in the process, are Sight Cymru consulted? Are there guidelines for contrast? Because I understand it's not colours, it's contrast. And some materials, particularly very shiny materials, can be very disturbing and distracting for people with impaired vision. So I just wondered whether, you know, that those, they had been consulted. Thank you.
Well, not by the planning authority. We need to obviously discuss with the developer whether they've had dialogue with interest groups such as that, expert interest groups who can provide advice. I can't answer the question really. I don't know whether they have, but I'd be surprised if they haven't. But yeah. We can certainly. There's a bit of a gap now. Even if members are minded to approve today, there's a bit of a gap. So we can make sure that those sort of observations are passed on to the developer to make sure that they have thought about those sort of things. But I'd like to think they have, but I can't confirm that exactly, Councillor Butler.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a good way to go forward with that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was pleased to see this proposal within this part of Monmouth. The Wye Bridge was built and designed many years ago, and a quick Google search tells me it was built in stone in the early 17th century and widened in 1878, which back then would have obviously been for horses and carts. As Councillor Bryn has said, today it is a busy bridge with lots of cars, lorries, buses, caravans and other heavy traffic. So in short, times have changed, meaning it is no longer really fit for purpose or safe for cyclists, buggies and pedestrians. As many of us know, the bridge is used by school pupils from both Monmouth Comprehensive School and the Haberdashers Boys' School. I therefore welcome this application, both for the safety of users and also to encourage active travel, and propose that it is recommended for approval today. I do have two questions which I would just like clarifying if possible. Firstly, will there be bike parks near the rowing club for those who cycle from Simmons Yat, the Forest of Dean, etc., who may want to come and visit the town? So will there be bike parks near the rowing club, or will they have to use existing ones that are in town, if there are any? And secondly, could you clarify how much of the car park will be taken up by construction workers or if they build the bridge, should it go ahead? The car park is popular with sixth form students, both from the boys' school and the comprehensive school during the daytime, and also by users of the rowing club and outdoor pursuits businesses during the evenings and weekends. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Phil, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I don't think there are proposed cycle parking areas by the rowing club. Again, that's something we can put to the applicant to see whether they see what their thoughts are on that. Obviously, there are some in the wider area, but there aren't. But again, we're happy to pass those sort of comments on to the developer to see whether those can be provided, especially as there's a lot of other environmental improvements going on in that area by the existing car park. In terms of the construction compound, we haven't got that sort of level of detail as to how much that's going to take up of the car park at this time, and what car parking would be retained for existing users. But there is condition for a construction management plan which could look at those areas, and that will have to sort of indicate the extent of the compound for for that period, because I think it is going to be roughly a 2-year build period from what we understand, partly because they can't carry out development at certain times of the year owing to nature conservation issues. So it's a complicated site. So that's something that that we can discuss with the developer via that condition, so that the users aren't too disrupted by this work.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. A little concerned, to be truthful. We've heard a lot about habitat and fish and spawning, but not once have we heard anything about the residents in the cottages. I had a difficulty in understanding the height of the access road to the actual bridge past those cottages. When we say we've got 1.8 metre screens, I'm concerned about the lighting intrusion to those cottages, and how are we going to ensure that life is sensible for living further in those cottages? I can't understand at this moment in time the distance, and perhaps you could clear that for me, against the houses. Are we supplying new trees, or are those trees already there? It just seems to be very close to these, and they haven't been mentioned at all in this discussion, and I wanted to bring that up, please.
Bill? To answer that? Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Crook. Yeah, the walkway will be roughly 40 metres from the nearest windows to the properties are there, and about 25 metres. It's in the report, it says 25 metres to the nearest part of their gardens. So it will be elevated inevitably, because it's going to be up above the riverbank, which is why the screen is needed, which will be 1.8 metres to screen, taller people, shall we say, on there. In terms of lighting, the lighting will be much like it is when it passes over the river. So the idea will be to light the decked area, but not to have light spill from the actual bridge itself into the environs, because as we know, species, not just obviously the concern with people, but species like otters will use the riverbank, so you don't want to illuminate that any more than is absolutely necessary. There obviously are the areas illuminated to some degree by the existing street lamps that are on the bridge and on the A40. So there's inevitably going to be some light spill into the river in that area, but this scheme is looking to minimise light spill in terms of its own direct impacts on that river corridor and on the residents in those properties. So 40 metres to nearest windows from the ramp up in the eastern side of it, and 25 metres to gardens.
And then can I ask how we're going to help protect them from heavy construction, noise and dust and so on going forward, please?
Yeah, so there will be a construction management plan again, Councillor Crook, to help cover that in terms of hours of working, how they control dust, smells, noise, etc. So we'll consult with environmental health on that information so that the condition can be discharged with confidence that they're going to have a viable scheme they can adhere to and not harm the amenity of residents.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Rutland.
Thank you, Chair. I found the site visit last Wednesday quite illuminating. Whilst we were on the bridge looking at the proposed routes, we were passed by two walkers who, as they came to the bend in the bridge on the eastern edge of the bridge, were passed by a HGV that actually mounted the curb to get around that corner. If it hadn't been for the lady who pulling the gentleman in towards her, I could have seen something serious happening. But the Councillor Bryn and others have kind of flagged up the dangers to pedestrians, especially school children, heading to and from the comprehensive schools. But we also have to understand that on the other side of that bridge is a little supermarket. So lots of people will be travelling, all times of the day. So anything that we can do to make that safer for them would be greatly received by them, I'm sure. One of the other things that was highlighted to me at that visit was the comprehensive school don't allow their children to walk down to the river when they're boating and stuff. They actually end up having to get minibuses and minibusing them down. A safe route for them to be able to access the riverbank will not only keep the children safe, but it will save them so much money in the long term if they're having to keep dragging the bus out to run people back and forth. So I'm all for this application, and I'm quite happy to propose that we approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. And Craig has just put a note in the chat. Craig, do you want to come back in for those who are online and won't have seen it?
Yes, I'm more than happy to, Chair. It was just in response to Councillor Butler's query about accessibility stake groups and the visually impaired. The developer has actually messaged me to say there was an event held on the 9th of March, and they are continuing to review that, so they'll continue to work with accessibility stakeholder meetings to establish that it is fit for purpose and meets everyone's requirements.
Thanks for that, Craig.
Thank you very much for that.
Councillor Hells.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Phil. I welcome any improvements to active travel, so I welcome this development of the footbridge and cycle bridge. I know there's a lot of attention already been given to the lighting aspect of the bridge. I wonder if consideration has been given to sort of lights that actually reduce when not in use. So with a PIR activated sensor, we have some in car park in Usk that reduce by 80% when not in use, so then come to full light. So I wonder if consideration has been given to that. And also, what consideration has been given to the knock-on effect of the active travel? Hopefully this will increase active travel, and has consideration been given to the current active travel that's already in place there and whether or not it's suitable? Thank you.
Okay, on the latter point, obviously we can only deal with the application in hand today, and I'm sure that the active travel team within MCC will be looking at the wider links to see that they're all fit for purpose and whether improvements have to be made as part of the wider network in the Monmouth area. And as you saw from the plan there that I alluded to, they're also looking to move this active travel route, so a proper formal active travel all the way up to Dixton to meet with the Peregrine Path, I think it's called, isn't it? The one further north, isn't it? So that would be positive, but obviously it's not part of this scheme. So I'm sure it will be looked at by the active travel team in terms of how the links to this whether they are fit for purpose and whether they need to be improved. On the PIR lighting, again, that's something we can put to the team. In terms of how the current scheme, I think it's been assessed in terms of it being, lit but not too bright, and that it will light the decked area rather than the wider area. They are looking to see that it can control the lighting as well from a central point, so that if it can control the brightness and maybe the times it's lit. So I think all those are sort of being looked at by the developer to make sure that the lighting isn't excessive and it's fit for purpose to create a safe environment, but not damaging to biodiversity. But we can certainly pass that on about maybe PIR, which is activated by users when they're approaching the bridge.
Yeah, it would certainly be an improvement if we did. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. I can see that this scheme is really needed. We were there on the visit and really useful, and as already been said, it's needed environmentally as well, environmentally positive. I just wanted to say that I'm really impressed by our planning group, or the planning team, because of responding so quickly to the residents, and I think it was the town council member and Councillor Bryn were talking about the canoe trailers. So the fact that you've followed that up already and got that as part talking to the applicant is wonderful. The other thing that was mentioned at the time was, if you look at the plan on proposed landscape master plan explained part 2, that plan, there's quite a turn onto the A40, or for the cyclist turning. We talked about that when we were there, and possible issue with people not having visibility as they turn, is it northwards up the A40? If you could show that plan, if you can see what was mentioned. Proposed landscape master plan explained part 2. That was that corner there as it's turning, well, to join the path that's adjacent to the A40, obviously. So that corner there, we were talking about the visibility and maybe some consideration being made to making sure that the trees or bushes or whatever are low enough so people can see people walking along that path or cycling.
Yeah, it was
turning right from the bridge.
It was controlling the type of plants put there, so we don't get too tall, wasn't it?
Yes, so we don't have smashes as people come off that bridge.
Yeah, seems very sensible, and we'll discuss that with the developer as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you all. Mine's a question really of Phil. This application is put forward by Monmouth County Council. Yeah, you're taking, there's quite a few points being made today. One was whether the bridge should be closed for pedestrians, there's bike stands, lighting. Why do we have to go back to the developer and ask them? Can't we, as the applicant, determine what we want? Thank you.
Craig.
Thank you, Councillor Easton, for the question. The council is the planning applicant in this respect. The local planning authority sits separate from that. Obviously, we have to make a decision, and the planning committee members have to make a decision based on the information before them today. The council is treated exactly the same as any other developer, any other person. We can have conversations and discussions with them about some of the things that the members are mentioning today, but ultimately, we have to make a planning decision as a local planning authority, which sits slightly outside of the council in this respect. So we can't agree things on behalf of the applicants, even though they are close colleagues. It's obviously we can put things to them, but we can't agree them as a planning local planning authority. So members need to consider what the information is in front of them today and make a decision as to whether they agree with the officer's recommendation or not. I can't, or my colleagues Phil and Andrew certainly can't agree things on the council's behalf. So, yeah, we do have to deal with it, Councillor Eaton, in terms of the information that is before you today. Just as I've got the speaker, the microphone as well, it's mindful to remember that Planning Committee today are looking to recommend approval of this, subject to the appropriate assessment coming back from Natural Resources Wales to conclude that the development will not have a harmful impact on the Wye River Sack, which is the special area of conservation. So if members do determine this application to approve this today, we will still be waiting for NRW to come back and confirm that the development will not have a harmful impact on nature conservation interests.
Thanks for that, Craig.
Thank you, Phil. Taking these matters back to our colleagues, can we be sure, I think there's 4 or 5 mentioned, that we can have hopefully a positive outcome to the suggestions made by members, because the plan is quite clear in my mind.
Yeah, thanks for that. Are there any points on there that should come possibly to delegated panel after, or do you want to do it that way, or will it come back to committee?
Well, I'm just thinking particularly Councillor Bond's point about maybe the planting or having some splayed areas there, that can be shown on a plan. I don't see why that couldn't be brought back to panel with the car parking arrangements for the kayak vans and trailers, so we can put that to the applicant. That's not a complicated piece of work. I think the other issues were just our heritage team just want surety, if you like, certainty about the actual material. So they're happy with it broadly, but it's just that very often things are conditioned and are conditioned in relation to private developers as well. So this is not unusual. It's just sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, really, to make us absolutely sure that this is the best possible development, really. But we're confident it will be, but we just want that absolute level of certainty that because this is a high-profile scheme, that it is the best. So that's why certain things are conditioned rather than us having it all up front. And that isn't unusual for this type of development.
Committee, are you content if something like that arises for it to come to the delegated panel rather than take up time in this committee? Everybody at home, put your hands up, or you've there. Thank you very much. Okay. In that case, nobody else has indicated that they want to speak. So, Rich, can you put the voting function up, please? Oh, Councillor McKenna asked for it to be approved. Can I have a seconder for that, Councillor Powell? Okay, we've got the voting function now. Can everybody vote now, please? Paige?
Okay, so that's approved, 14 for approval.
Okay, can somebody ask Councillor Bryn to come back? Richard, can you? Thanks for your patience, Councillor Bryn.
Councillor Bond has hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Bond, you've got your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. With reference to what I said about things that were brought up when we actually undertook the visit, would it be possible, or would it be sensible, perhaps you could think of, whether it'd be useful to be a few days before the planning meeting, as it was this time accidentally, whether that helps insofar as the little things being looked at in the meantime? Just a suggestion. Does that make sense? So the separation between the visit and the actual planning meeting, was it useful to have a couple of extra days?
Rather than do it the day before, you mean?
That just for your consideration, please. Not suggesting, proposing necessarily. Thank you.
We'll have a chat about it. It's just basically time for officers to do the reports and whatever. I can see the benefit in it, because if there's anything that arises on the site, it gives more time to officers to do it. Phil, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, it was a bit random why I put that day, but it was and it wasn't, because there was nothing in the council diary that day, which made, certainly for that morning, which helped me to pick that day. The site visits are in the diary on a Monday now, aren't they? So it's just making sure that there's no other important meetings that you might be expected to go to on the days running up to the committee, you know, that it's just logistics really. But yeah, I take the point. We can have a look at that.
Okay, coming back to the agenda, as you know, we're not looking at the Castle Meadows site in Abergavenny now, but we do have some appealed decisions, and Andrew, you're coming in on those?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just wait for the slides to come up. So there's two appeal decisions to report to you this month. So the first you can see on screen, this is a barn which is had planning permission in the past to be converted to a dwelling. It's mid-construction, as you can see on screen. So planning permission was applied to erect a single-storey flat-roofed porch to the front elevation of the barn. You can see that on the top drawing where Phil's cursor is, and then it's there projecting on the image below. So officers refused this application, the main issues being the effect on the character and appearance of the building and the wider area, and having particular regard to our policy H4, which covers barn conversions. And officers refused the application, feeling that the flat roof porch was overtly domestic, given its design and appearance, and would fail to respect the rural character and design of the building. However, the appointed inspector noted, and this is their quote, that the angular form, flat roof and glazing would create a temporary feature which would not be overtly domestic in appearance, and that it would be visually distinguished from the host building and so retain the barn's identity as the primary building. And on that basis, the inspector did allow the appeal, so permission was granted for the porch. So an interesting decision. I think officers have obviously got their own views and felt that such a feature was not appropriate for a traditional rural building, but that is the inspector's decision, and permission has been granted. So the second appeal to report to you, members may be familiar with this site. This was for a full application for a detached dwelling at Pathways. This is Vinegar Hill down in Undy. So the site already features one dwelling. You can see that the sort of far left there, that's Pathways. And previously, two dwellings had been given planning permission to be built in the grounds, and this appeal location would have constituted the fourth dwelling. Officers refused the planning application for two reasons. The first, on the basis that the existing access, which is Phil's helpfully showing there, into the site would not be suitable as a private drive, given its restricted width. Officers felt that the use of this access by an additional dwelling would be detrimental to the safe passage of vehicles using the private drive, and therefore contrary to our adopted highway design guide. And the second reason for refusal by officers was that the applicant had failed to enter an appropriate legal agreement to secure the necessary financial contributions towards affordable housing. However, the appointed inspector found that having regard to the low traffic volume, domestic use of the driveway, and the driveway width and alignment, that there was little evidence to suggest that an additional dwelling would give any rise to significant highway safety risks. And as such, the inspector concluded that the proposal was compliant with our relevant policy MV1. However, there was an absence of a completed legal agreement to secure the affordable housing provision, and it's on this basis that the appeal was dismissed. But the point and reason for refusal in regards to highway safety, the inspector was not in agreement with us on. So, but ultimately, the lack of 106 was the reason it was dismissed. So.
Chair, can I have a say on that, please? I'm so disappointed that this appeal has not been granted to us. It was clear that this application did not conform to the 4.1 metres that you agreed as officers. And I just wondered whether we have any redress on this, because this road...
So they've not got planning for it. The appeal was dismissed.
Sorry, I understood that...
No, they agreed that the highways was all right, but they turned the appeal down on the basis of the Section 106 agreement, so it was dismissed.
So, I beg your pardon, I understood it was on access to Vinegar Hill.
Craig?
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the reason for refusal on highway safety, yes, what Chair has just said is completely correct. So the planning inspector have found that the highway safety is acceptable. What I think you're referring to, Councillor Cook, is that if an application comes for us in the future for a similar development, then as a local planning authority, we wouldn't be refusing on highway grounds now, because we've had the decision from the Planning Environment Decisions Wales group. So it wouldn't be a future reason for refusing if a future application was to be submitted. Ultimately, if the affordable housing contribution is provided, local planning authority would be in a position to recommend approval.
Apologies, Chair, I misunderstood that.
That's okay, glad we've cleared it up. Okay, right, we've come to the end of the agenda, so Councillor Powell?
Yes, I wonder if I'm just going to say something for the people who are wondering about having the planning close to it. When I was first on the planning committee many years ago, and Phil will remember as well, Anne, we used to have the planning committee, and then at the planning committee, we'd decide whether we wanted to go and visit somewhere. Then you had a date to go and visit it, and it would come back again to another planning committee. Now, you must admit that this is far more suitable now, where we go to look at everything first before it comes to planning committee, because that did spin it out for weeks, didn't it? So just to say, things were worse once, and they're much better now the way it's organised. Thank you.
Thanks for that. But we will have a look and see. It is going to come down to whether or not it clashes with the council diary. Okay, thank you everybody, and we'll see you next time.